So before we welcome our next speaker, I would like just to run by you again some key facts, but not too many of them, don't worry, don't be afraid. Just let's consider that more than 3 billion people are depending on fishing or ocean-farmed food for their subsistence. 3 billion people out of the 8 billions. And the second figure I wanted to give you is that the proportion of overfished stocks has reached 35%, again, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 35%, and 57% more are at risk of becoming overfished. So when oceans suffer, the entire planet is at risk. And food supply, protein supply, we were discussing protein supply a while ago, is at risk. To discuss this, I would like to call on stage Bren Smith. Bren is the founder and co-executive director of GreenWave. Hello, Bren.
Hi.
Bren, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Actually, the title of this session should be, in your case, not from field to table, but probably from oceans to table, right?
Yep.
I introduced you very briefly a while ago, but let me add that you grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, and you started in life as a fisherman on industrial boats, right? And then over the years, you've become a pioneer and expert in regenerative ocean farming. So your life story will probably inspire lots of people here. You actually wrote a book about it that has just been translated into French. Well, I'll come to that later. And so my first question, as your story is the story of a life journey, I would like you to tell us more about your beginnings in life.
Sure, yeah. A complete honor to be here. Amazing to hear everybody. I feel like I have the lowest IQ up here. It's kind of scary. So I was born and raised in Newfoundland, Canada, little fishing village, fisherman's co-op. All our houses were painted red, greens, and blues so we could find our way home in the fog when we were a bit drunk. And all I ever wanted to be was a fisherman. And, I look back and ask why. And I think, they go out in the morning, they have self-directed lives, succeed and fail on their own terms, and have this pride of feeding your country and community. It's, these are the jobs we write and sing songs about. The coal workers, the farmers, the steel workers, the cowboys, these are like soul-filling jobs. And I think one of the questions in the era of climate change is how do we create jobs like that, jobs that we'll sing songs about. So when I was 14, I dropped out of high school and headed out to sea. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. It's the beard. It's the beard. Oh. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
And so dropped out of high school when I was 14 and headed out to sea. Fished the globe, herring, lobster, tuna, ended up in Alaska in the Bering Sea, fishing cod and crab. And I love that, right? The humility of being in, 40, 50-foot seas, that sense of solidarity of being in the belly of the boat. This is one of those jobs. The trouble was I was fishing at the height of industrialized fishing. We were tearing up entire ecosystems with our trawls. And I think, I didn't know it then, I didn't have words, but it's clear when you fish and you see seas of death around you, you think, oh, this isn't going to be, there's no future in this. The captains of industry are going to fish the last fish, but I want to die on my boat. That's like the metric of success, right? And that level of ecological destruction, that just wasn't viable.
Actually, at the beginning of I think the 1990s, you witnessed Newfoundland face struggling, right? Because there were no fish anymore. Yeah. It became increasingly difficult.
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked through 2 ecological collapses, right? And that first one, I was on the Bering Sea, and I got news that the cod stocks, the fish stocks, crashed in my home. 30,000 people thrown out of work overnight. And it is amazing to see an economy built up over hundreds of years, a culture 100 years, just like decimated. And fishermen, you know, walking the streets like hungry ghosts. And, you know, that's where I think there was a beginning of a change there, where I thought environmental, you know, I'm not an environmentalist, I'm not a foodie. I come at this as a climate solutions space. And I thought environmentalism was like saving seals and birds and bees, and that the environmentalists had always talked at me about that, you know. But then when you see a culture collapse, you're like, oh my God, there aren't going to be any jobs on a dead ocean, on a dead planet. So that was the pivot, where I went through this like journey of ecological redemption in many ways, searching for a new relationship to the seas.
So you quit fishing, right? You tried aquaculture, but was not a big success, was it?
Oh my God.
You were on a salmon farm.
Yeah, on the salmon farms. And that was, you know, everybody told me that was the great answer. You blue jobs, we're going to feed the planet, lower pressure on fish stocks. And it was like industrial pig farming out at sea. And pesticides, antibiotics. You know, we were growing neither fish nor food. Like, I know the color of fish, I know the taste of fish, and this wasn't it. And it was, I think, everything that a solution shouldn't be. And the mistake aquaculture made, and it's still making, I think, is that it grew around markets, not around the ocean. So people want to eat salmon and tuna, cod, so they're like, okay, let's grow those. But that's a wild palate. Instead of asking the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? What's unique about the ocean as an agricultural space? And then growing around that. And so that's sort of been the bumpy journey I've been on since then.
So you started working on something else, on another solution to actually help feed the planet without ruining the planet. And you call this 3D ocean farming.
Yeah.
It's a bit mysterious. What is 3D ocean farming?
Well, we called it, so like I called it 3D ocean farming, underwater farming, settled on regenerative ocean farming, but really had no idea what to call it. Yeah. And so think of an underwater garden. And you've got anchors at the side, on the edges, then line, we call rope line. Let's just say rope up to the surface, buoys, and then horizontal lines. It's a rope scaffolding system. And from there, you grow as many different crops as you can. And the key is, you ask the ocean, what does it make sense to grow? And the ocean says, why don't you grow things that don't swim away and you don't have to feed? Right? That's what's unique about the ocean. We can use that whole water column to grow many different species. We can grow seaweeds and shellfish together. You know, there are 11,000 different kinds of seaweeds in the ocean, hundreds of kinds of shellfish. There's something we can grow everywhere. But the other key here, just from a farmer's perspective, ocean farmer's perspective, is it's zero inputs. So no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed. Everything we grow just uses the sunlight and nutrients, and that creates really low overhead. The business model becomes simpler, and as the price of food on land goes up because of fresh water and stuff like that, ours actually remains constant.
And how about kelp?
Yeah.
Among those things you grow in your 3D farm, vertical farm, there's kelp, and it's...
Yeah, I got it.
Why should we be interested in kelp and in seaweeds?
I have no idea. No, I mean, I have to be honest. Like, I wasn't that fascinated by kelp. What happened was I had an oyster farm, did quite well, and then I was destroyed. My farm was destroyed 2 years in a row by Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy. Like, I was at the front lines of climate change. This was probably 15 years ago or something. And had to change, and it turns out that plants are easier to grow than animals. One of the fastest growing plants on earth is kelp, and I was able to use that scaffolding system, that vertical system, to grow seaweeds. And then that's been this journey of getting to know sort of seaweeds over time, and they're powerful technologies. I read a great French quote, actually. It said, like the firefly, seaweed can be more than it is. Like, it yearns to be something more than it is, and I think that's where we are in the era of climate change. So kelp, zero inputs, like I said. It's the sequoia of the sea, one of the fastest growing plants, soaks up carbon, nitrogen, rebuilds reefs. Like, it breathes life back into the ocean. It's also replicable, so like $20,000 to $50,000 you can start a farm. It's just ropes and buoys. It means a regular person like me can do this, but it is scalable. Like, I think one of the issues with the food movement, at least in the US, I can't speak for Europe in any way, is that it's still like small is beautiful or big is necessary, right? So vertical integration or sort of cute, Hudson Valley farms. And instead we need something that is about replication, network production, horizontal benefit, not vertical benefit, and kelp allows for that. And the scalability, I mean, if you were to take less than 4% of US waters to have regenerative ocean farms, you could replace the entire agricultural emissions of the state of California. So we can think big, but be distributed and have the benefits go to just, simple folks like me.
So 10 years ago, you created that non-profit organization called GreenWave.
Yeah.
And precisely to spread the methods that you developed. Can you please tell us more about this? About what do you do at GreenWave?
Sure, yeah. So what happened was I had a lot of my fellow fishermen and lobstermen starting, well, like a handful coming because the lobsters disappeared in Long Island Sound. I mean, like, disappeared. Gill nets were coming up empty. And so I started training some folks, formed a little tiny nonprofit. Quite honestly, it was like slightly corrupt. It was just like little friends of mine, and I was trying to get them going. But then, built this training program, and 8,000 people signed up for the training program, just in the US, but then over 100 countries, right? We were like, oh my, I'm allowed to swear, but I was like, holy shit, this is like unbelievable, right? And so my co-founder and I, Emily Stengel, got together and were like, okay, let's get serious about this. So we did a couple things. We built an online open source curriculum, 80 videos, how to train people. We've got 6,000 people in an ocean farming community where people are learning together. We have a subsidy program where you get paid to grow kelp, and you give us data in return. So we've got a MyKelp app. We have a farmer-led infrastructure program, so like farmer-owned seed banks, so we don't privatize seed. I mean, I think the benefit of this and why so many people came to it was like it's a blank slate. Like, how often in history can we start from the bottom up, take all the lessons from land-based ag, from industrial agriculture, and like build something we're proud of that's beautiful to make sure that young people and beginning farmers can access, that leases are available, that we do polyculture, not monoculture. And it's amazing. If you grow kelp next to mussels, you get a 20% higher yield of mussels. So like Mother Nature doesn't want monoculture, wants diversity, and these species don't compete, they collaborate. Mm-hmm. So it's good for the environment, breathe life for the ocean, but it's good for us that want to die on our boats. And like, I don't know who's going to write the first kelp sea shanty, but I'm waiting, right? Because we are proud of this, and that's where we really want to go. And imagine, like, we need to tap into that blue-collar innovation. Like, the amazing thing about not environmentalism, but I think the climate change era, which includes environmentalism, is that we can create this big tent, a just transition. We can take on this moral responsibility that if we're going to affect people's farms and lives and the kitchen tables and their livelihoods, we have to offer solutions. Like, the climate movement is not like the politics of no, it's the politics of yes. And that's how you get like people who look like they vote for Trump, not voting for Trump because I'm part of everyone on the stage. This is my community, and we're gettable. Like, I know you got folks protesting all over the country, farmers, and we have it in the U.S. where everyone's moving right. We can use climate solutions to actually create sort of a regenerative politics, right? And get the conversations and the stories and build something new out in the ocean. And to me, some extent, that's the most exciting part. Like, my folks protecting the oceans, not because they love like high-end food or they want to hang out at environmental rallies. They're there because this is where their souls are.
Your own farm is in the Thimble Islands,
yeah.
right? It's off the coast of Connecticut.
Yep.
does your model adapt to any kind of seas? Would it work in, like, say, Indonesia or the Caribbean, or can you do 3D farming there as well?
Yeah, so I don't know how to, because I'm a cold weather farmer, so we really work mainly in northern climates. But in our sort of knowledge network, we have a lot of folks that have been working on farms, and you know, there's nothing new here. I didn't invent anything. I did take like a bunch of different types of farming and bring them together and make it economically viable. But like, you know, a guy that was shipwrecked in Ireland, in France here, and he tried to net some birds. He put out a net, and all these mussels attached to the nets. That became the first mussel farm in history. Right? The indigenous communities in the Pacific Northwest did clam walls in order to make clams. Like, this is something that's happened. So in Indonesia and Latin America, all over this place, we just need to pull from that tradition. In fact, push soy off the plate, right? Push soy off the soil and move in these regenerative crops. And so it's not a new thing. It's more a discovery of a cuisine and a history that we've had.
What are the main obstacles that someone who would like to try that and to move into ocean regenerative farming, what should they expect?
Well, you know, it's not for everyone. You got to be willing to break ice off the gunnel of your boat in the middle of the winter, right? Like, people come out for eco tours and they're like, oh, they come to the docks and just leave, right? So I mean, it's, you know, it's a physical demanding job. It doesn't mean you need to do that. We have, you know, the seed banks, the hatcheries, the processing, the policy, the entrepreneurs that are doing these startups. There's many ways in, but so I think it's hard work. Like, I've got the body of a 70-year-old. Like, ask my wife, she's just like, this is not working out, right? But the other thing is, every day the weather's different, the ocean's different, the climate's different. So you need a mentality of flexibility and pivoting. And I think that is the nature of what it is to be a fisherman, right? So that psychology is really important. But whether on land and sea, like, every day, volatility is what we face, and that's what it's a mental skill set. And I don't want to oversell this. I have to say something about, like, solution space. Very often we're like pitching, and this is the answer and stuff. This is just a piece of the puzzle. Climate solutions are hard. They're expensive. They're bumpy. We have to do them. We have no choice. But like, actually, I have a lot of hope from solutions coming together. The cross-pollination is, as opposed to like me as the answer, you know, solving all of these issues.
Are you convinced that consumers are ready to quit eating fish and try something?
No, not at all. I mean, changing consumer taste is slow, and what's the planet's going to die in 9 years or something, a decade, right? We don't. That's what the UN says. We got to move fast. Consumers, it is part of it, but I think we need like a multiple-tier strategy. And so how we've approached it is a whole leaf strategy for kelp. Shellfish has its own trajectory, but it's not as scalable in the same way. With kelp, the whole leaf. So yes, you do. I make like, you know, kelp curries and mustards and stuff like that for local restaurants. That boutique. Then you have the plant-based diets, you know, the kelp mushroom burgers, things like that. And
there are recipes in your book, actually.
Yeah. But then also, you know, the kelp can be used as bioplastics. But one of the things we're working pretty intensely now is in soil amendments. So there's all these nutrients in the ocean that the land needs, as this regenerative agriculture thing. And everybody was like, soil crisis. And I was like, shit, I got all your nutrients. I'll sell it back to you, right?
Rhaenyra, that's for you.
Right, there it is. And it's amazing. So if the studies show that if you take seaweeds, you ferment it, actually, break it down, get it into the soil, it provides heat and water, drought tolerance, so abiotic stress, to land-based farmers. So it's actually like a value proposition for climate resiliency, and allows you to reduce use on fertilizer and things like that. And I would say something about price point. Why I do think we're going to be eating this, is the climate winds are at our backs as ocean farmers, because as the price of water goes up, fertilizer, land, feed, ours is going to remain constant, as I said. So I think naturally this is going to become regular folks' food. The question is it going to be disgusting or is it going to be delicious? I mean, we have an entire, globe of amazing chefs that are specialized in making gross things delicious, right? And so we can tap into that. The other thing is, hide the kelp, right? Like it's an ingredient. Weave it into all these different industries. The soy industry did this. They sat there in the 50s with their cigars and their suits, and they're like, we're never going to get Americans to eat soy, so let's put it in everything. And I think we can replace a lot of ingredients that way.
Well, thank you, Bren, for this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so
for
much.
This inspiring example.
Okay, an honor.
Thank you for speaking in spite of the jet lag. I know you're completely jet lagged, so thank you for the effort. I would like just to mention that Bren has written a book called, in English, Eat Like a Fish, but it was just published in French. So for those here that are interested, it's called in French Le Fermier des Océans. On peut tous changer de vie, published at the edition de l'Arbre qui marche. And there will be a book signing right now next to the bookstore. Bren is here, so please feel free to meet him there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.